Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Kate Mackintosh. I'm the Deputy Registrar of the ICTY, and I'm very happy to be here today. I found all the discussions extremely illuminating, and I'd like to thank everybody for that on a personal note. Then I'd also like to express my gratitude to the donors who helped make the whole thing possible, in particular the European Union, the governments of Switzerland, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, the Republic of Korea, and the Open Society Justice Initiative. I'd like to applaud the efforts of all our staff from the ICTY who worked to make this happen. Our staff here in Bosnia, as well as our staff in Belgrade and back in The Hague. And most of all, I would like to sincerely thank all of you who've joined us here both today and yesterday, and I must say, despite the weather conditions. For the ICTY, this conference has been not about talking, but really about listening to what the people of the former Yugoslavia have to say on this 20th anniversary of the ICTY, and in particular how you want to move forwards from the work that the ICTY has done today and how you want to build on that work. I think 20 years is a serious anniversary. It merits a small pause for reflection and for taking stock. What does 20 years' work of a court look like? And perhaps here I speak somewhat from the registry perspective. We've had some discussion of the jurisprudence and some of the judgments that have been handed down. But 20 years of work of a court, from my perspective, looks like over 7,500 days of trial, captured in 1.6 million pages of transcripts. It looks like 4,500 witnesses who've travelled to The Hague from really all over the world, or have painstakingly given their statements to the court in another form. And it looks like, as we've heard earlier today already, it looks like 161 individuals indicted for some of the most serious crimes and dealt with according to the rule of law. So yes, I think 20 years is a moment to pause and to look back at these achievements. And I think it's also a point from which we can actually see the end of the ICTY. And this conference was intended to build a space in which, or to create a space in which we, or perhaps more appropriately you, could think about how to start building on these achievements towards what Ms. Natasha Kandic referred to as mechanisms to overcome the limitations of criminal justice. Because criminal justice, as we've heard several times today, can only ever be one element, one small piece of the larger puzzle in moving towards recovery from conflict and mass crimes, towards reconciliation and healing. I hope and believe that the ideas that have been shared here, worked on and developed here, both today and yesterday, around the issue of witness protection, of open access to the judicial archives, which we didn't talk about today, but on which there was a very productive working group yesterday, and on the critical issue of reparations to victims, will be taken forward here in the region and will form the basis of the work that is to be done over the next 20 years. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Now I call upon the mayor of Sarajevo, Professor Dr. Ivo Komšić, to address this gathering by giving his closing remarks. Thank you. I would like to greet you all, and I would like to express my misfortunately, I wasn't able to actively participate in both 2 days of this conference. However, it was with great pleasure that I have arrived just nearing the end of this conference. And I would like to say something, of course, with gratitude that all of us have extended to the ICTY for their work that has been done in the last 20 years. I will not be repetitive and use all the phrases that are usually said during similar conferences. I am glad to have this conference in Sarajevo that was under the siege for so many days. I will not repeat this history. This town was a victim, a symbol of suffering and symbol of restoration of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Sarajevo shows its possibilities, shows that we exist and have internal capacities and people who, if used, can overcome everything that has happened before. I will not speak about this. I can see that you have already talked a lot about these issues yesterday and today, but I will simply resume on the item where Ms. Mackintosh ended when saying that it is a very important issue, legacy of the ICTY. 20 years after its establishment. Of course, the legacy of the ICTY are judgments imposed for for war crimes, judgments concerning individuals, because the ICTY is a legal institution which establishes individual responsibility of those who committed crimes based on adduced evidence. However, yesterday there were some discussions on the topic that I'm going to share with you, and it was mentioned a few times today. Legacy of ICTY includes the archive, a huge materials including 16 million pages, which also includes statements of a huge number of witnesses and so on. This is the archive collected by prosecutors, defense lawyers as well. Why is it important for us today? The ICTY would finish their legal part of work and they will complete the trials against persons who are currently standing the trials, and this archive remains valuable for us, and I'm glad to see that it was said it should be at our disposal through information centers that you discussed about. It is very important to have one such center in Sarajevo. I'm not telling you this as a mayor of Sarajevo. I'm telling you this in a role of a capacity of a professor at university. All of us who deal with humanistic and social sciences, that culpability is not only a legal matter. The ICTY will establish individual criminal responsibility. The ICTY establishes individual culpability. However, in our case, as well as any case of crimes that were committed in any war, we know that apart from individual responsibility established through legal proceedings before the court, that there are responsibilities as well. I would like to mention the things that the old person after the Second World War said, that there is a political responsibility, that there is moral responsibility and metaphysical responsibility as well. This archive, for us who deal with social and humanistic sciences, should be accessible to us and to all these who would, after the legal proceedings have been completed and individual responsibilities established, would deal through these documents and materials with these responsibilities, because political responsibility is not individual responsibility. Politics is a collective act. One individual cannot act exclusively with politics. There are different groups in Bosnia and Herzegovina, in the region, who bear political responsibility for crimes, and they will never stand trial because it was not individual responsibility that is established by the court. But those who deal with theory of actions and theory of politics, politicians, social psychologists, even psychologists, it is very important, better for them to establish political culpability, because without establishing political culpability we cannot explain the events that took place, we cannot explain the background of crimes, we cannot explain the atmosphere, the the atmosphere and situation in which people were brought and committed the crimes. So it is very important for the archive to be accessible for this type of research, to be additionally, when we speak about moral culpability, it seems to be an less important thing. However, it is not. One can see that in consequences from the war, because there are people who are ill now and they are diagnosed with a certain sort of illness who are morally completely destroyed and psychologically as well, because they did something which brought up their conscience in the first line. When after everything passed, they faced themselves, and we know we're at this edge of the knife where we meet our true selves. Those who deal with this must respond to the question, how could have it happened that all morals failed and that people, some on their self-initiative and some regardless of moral obligation toward themselves, how were they able to commit those atrocities regardless of the command orders that they held in front of them? You have many cases where those who committed the crimes violated military orders. They went even much further than the orders issued to them. Scientists must respond to these questions. Of course, this involves a huge engagement of psychology and social psychology. For these sciences, these archives would be very valuable. And finally, I will also mention metaphysical responsibility. In order to establish it, we must have these archives as well. And I believe that based on these archives, one can see who bears responsibility for the things that were not done and the things that could have been done. This is a metaphysical responsibility I'm referring to, which the old Jaspers mentioned with respect to the crimes committed during the Second World War. What is this all about? We are not speaking about responsibility of local persons for failing to do something. Those who could have saved people did not do so. It's a huge problem. How come that people were standing and looking at brutal crimes being committed before their eyes without making any reaction? How come a crime become custom? And this is where responsibility lies. One should establish metaphysical responsibility. We cannot even establish political responsibility, but we can speak about metaphysical responsibility of IC, particularly of countries of European Union who stood and watched from the beginning. They had European monitors from the beginning. They received very extensive reports about the things that were ongoing, and they had electronic and video satellite observance over all events that had taken place, and they overtapped the commander. I know that because I listened to some of the reports. They wired them, and they knew that the orders about heinous crimes were issued, but they did nothing to prevent them. This is responsibility not for the ICTY, not for any court, because it is not individual responsibility involved. This is a type of responsibility that the science should establish and put in literature so that everyone knows what happened at the beginning at the end of the 20th century, after everything that had taken place during the Second World War, as if the crimes never happened. This is how some representatives of IC acted in relation to everything that had happened in our country. So it is very important that this legacy be preserved in the archive, which would be a huge archive and to be accessible through information center. And I would be very happy, not only as a mayor, but as a professor at the university dealing with these issues, that these archives be accessible to us through information centers, not only to me, I believe to many people who would deal with these issues. As a professor, students, PhD working on their doctoral thesis from all over the world come and ask me about this, because I had a significant role during the war, and since I know a lot about this, thank you for your attention. I would like to stress one more time, it's a huge, tremendous importance of the archive and the decision that it should be available to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Komšić, for the memorable closing remarks. Now I will give the floor to the Ambassador of Switzerland in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Mr. Andrzej Schuler, to give his final remarks.
Dobro večer. Dear participants, I know I'm here to conclude the conference, so let me just make 3 points. First, thank you very much to all of you who made this conference marking the 20th anniversary of ICTY here in Sarajevo possible. My thanks go to you, speakers and participants, who came from different countries here to Sarajevo. With your diverse expertise and experience, being it as judges, being it as prosecutors, as representatives of victims, representatives of civil society, as scholars and journalists, you contributed to the important work during the last 2 days. I'm sorry I could not attend your work. I had other obligations. We had an own conference, but my team was here and they briefed me about your work. Such discussions are difficult and are still painful for the victims and for their families. But it is important to maintain the dialogue. Respect and dialogue are essential on the long road to reconciliation. My thanks go also to the organizers, to the ICTY and its staff providing this forum. My thanks go to the European Union, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, the Republic of Korea, and the Open Society Justice Initiative for their valuable support. Second point, we are all aware that the work of tribunals and courts, national and international, is a necessary precondition that men and women, that countries, a region, can effectively deal with the past after a gruesome and atrocious conflict. And that's where the work of the courts is crucial. They have a right to justice, that justice is rendered and that the perpetrators are held responsible according to the laws. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, Switzerland, together with other international partners, had assisted this dealing of the past process. For instance, by supporting the search for missing persons, by supporting witness protection, and by supporting the prosecution of war criminals. Third point, ladies and gentlemen, the past is important, and at the same time, we have to look to the future. It is our obligation to take all the necessary steps to make sure that the atrocious crimes and human rights violations which the victims had to suffer will never happen again. Da se više nikada ne ponovi. And this is not about only addressing the dark sides of human behavior. No, it's equally important to show the examples of men and women who stand up against inhumanity. And this also happened here. For example, Srđan Aleksić, who lost his life saving his friends Alan Glavovic in Trebinje, or think just of those who preserved the Sarajevo Haggadah through many conflicts. They give hope to all of us, and above all, to the young generation. They give proof that we are not trapped in any historical cycles. Life is about choices. It is courageous men and women who make the difference and build the future based upon humane values. The future doesn't just happen. We need to build it. Ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, let me assure you that Switzerland, together with the other international partners here present, will continue to support the citizens of Bosnia and Herzegovina and the region to deal with the past and to build the future. Thank you very much. Hvala vam puno.
Thank you, Ambassador, for your closing words, and this officially closes our conference. Thank you very much for everything.